All right, welcome to our next video. This is on adding integers, and it's going to be broken up into three parts, basically the three different methods that we learned on how to add integers together. So the first one is using our number line. So whenever we have a problem, so say -4 plus 7, the first number tells you where to start on the number line. So in this case, I would start at -4. The second number tells you how many to move from your starting point, or how many places to move from your starting point. So I want to move 7 spots. The key is going to be whether your number is a positive or negative. If you're adding a positive integer, you're going to move to the right on your number line because you're moving towards the positive numbers. If you're adding a negative integer, you're going to move to the left. You're headed in the negative direction. So here's what that's going to look like. Here I start at -4. I'm adding a positive 7. So I'm going to move 7 places to the right. Wherever I end up, that's going to be my answer. So let's see that in action. I start at 8. That's my starting point. I want to add a -5. A negative means go to the left 5 spots. So you can draw it out and just count 5 places, and we end up at a positive 3. So it wasn't enough to take me past 0. I just moved closer to 0. -2 plus -7. So I'm going to start at -2. I'm adding a negative number, so I'm going to move to the left. If you don't like drawing the arrows, you can use little hops. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 places, and I end up at a -9. 4 plus -9, so I'm going to start at 4. I'm going to add a -9, which means I'm going to head in the negative direction 9 spots to -5. Now I want to add another -3, so I'm going to go farther down into the negatives 3 more spots and end up at an answer of -8. So the first number tells me where to start. The second number tells me how many spots to go, and the sign tells me what direction to go. Left if I'm adding a negative number, right if I'm adding a positive number. All right, part 2. Part 2 is using counters. Basically using positives and negatives to represent the problem. When one positive is paired with a negative, the result is called a zero pair. So think of it as a +1 and a -1. +1 plus -1 equals 0 because the value of the pair is 0. They add up to be 0. You can add or remove 0 pairs from the problem because adding or removing 0 does not change the value. I can add 0 to a number as long as I want. Nothing's going to change. I could take away 0 from a number. Not going to change. But this just gives us another visual way of showing how to tackle a problem. So here I have -7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 negatives. I have 3 positives. So I'm going to combine those together. So remember, a negative plus a positive turns to 0. So we can cancel that piece out because I can get rid of my zeros. So any pairs that I can make of a positive and a negative turn to 0, and I can get rid of them. Whatever I'm left with, in this case, 4 negatives, that's going to be my answer. So here I have 8 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 6 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, I want to look for how many pairs can I make. A positive and a negative turn to a 0, so they cancel each other out. Thing is, a positive and negative each kind of takes themselves out in a battle. And I'm left with 2 positives left over, so my answer is a +2. The last one tends to be a little tricky, so be careful. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 negatives, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives. Well, a negative and a negative don't cancel each other out. It just becomes more negative. So when they both have the same signs, nothing is going to get canceled out. So we just add them together. Together, I have 14 negatives. So I have an answer of -4. All right, on to part 3. And this is where we come up with our rules. So instead of a visual model, we're going to use our rules to help us add and subtract our positives and negatives. Okay? If you were in class, you kind of got to hear the creepy song sung to Row, Row, Row you wrote. Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the higher number. Okay? But here are the rules. If you're adding two numbers with the same sign, you're going to keep the sign, because they're both on the same team, and just add the numbers together. So if they're both positives, you add them together, it stays positive. If they're both negative, you add them together, they stay negative. So down here, a -12 plus a -13. Same signs, so we're going to add them together. And we're going to keep the sign. They were both negative, so it's going to stay -25. So think of it as it just got more negative. Here, 5 plus 8. They're both positive, so it's going to stay positive. 5 plus 8 is 13. The trick is when they have different signs. If you're adding two numbers with different signs, take the sign of the larger number and then subtract the two numbers from each other. Think back to what we did in part 2. We had 7 negatives and 4 positives. When they cancel each other out, there was more negatives left over. So you're really finding the difference between the two numbers. I always think of it as a battle, the positives versus the negatives. Who's going to win? That's the sign. How many are they going to win by? That's the answer to the problem. So -8 plus +11. So the positive number is bigger. 11 is bigger than 8, so I know it's going to be positive. And then I subtract. 11 minus 8 gives me 3. So +3. Here, -6 plus +4. Here, the negative is bigger. I have 6 negatives to only 4 positives. So the negatives are going to win. How many are they going to win by? Well, they're going to win by 2. There's 2 more negatives than there are positives. So as I scroll down here a little bit, when you have a larger problem like this, tackle it one at a time. So let's do -7 plus 9. Take this, they have different signs, so we're going to subtract them. 9 minus 7 is 2. Take the sign of the larger number. 9 is bigger than -7, so it's going to be a +2. And then I'm going to add it to the next number. +2 plus -6. They have different signs, so again I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Take the sign of the larger number. The 6 is bigger than the 2, so I know my answer is going to be -4. The negatives are bigger than the positives. So same thing goes with our last one here. 63 plus -35. So first thing to notice is they have different signs. It's a battle between the positives and negatives. Who's going to win? Well, the positives are going to win because 63 is bigger than 35. And I want to know how many I'm going to win by. So I have to find the difference between my numbers. And I get an answer of +28. So same signs, add them together and keep the signs. They have different signs. They're battling the positives versus the negatives. Decide which team has more players, which number is bigger. That's going to be the sign. And then you subtract the two numbers to find the difference between the two.